At 0642 on the morning of December 17th, 1939, Corporal Simo Häyhä lay motionless in a snowbank near the Kollaa River, watching a tree line 400 meters away through iron sights his commanding officer had called primitive. 34 years old, Finnish Civil Guard marksman with a cabinet full of shooting trophies, 0 confirmed kills. The temperature had dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius overnight. Häyhä had been in position since 0400 hours, crawling the final 200 meters on his stomach to avoid disturbing the fresh powder snow. His white snow cape covered everything except his eyes. He had packed snow around his rifle barrel to prevent his breath from creating vapor that might reveal his position. He had placed a small mound of snow in his mouth for the same reason, letting it melt slowly so his exhaled air would not form a visible cloud in the frozen air. His fingers were numb inside double layers of wool mittens. His legs had lost feeling 2 hours ago. The cold had seeped through his reindeer fur-lined boots and 4 layers of woolen undergarments. But Häyhä did not move. He was waiting. The Soviet Union had invaded Finland 17 days earlier with over 450,000 troops. The Red Army expected victory within 2 weeks. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov had told the world that bombers over Helsinki were dropping food parcels to starving Finnish workers. Dmitry Shostakovich had been commissioned to write a celebratory suite for the victory parade in Helsinki. The Finnish army had approximately 180,000 men to defend a border stretching over 1,300 kilometers. At Kollaa, the situation was worse. The Finnish 12th Division held a front of approximately 30 kilometers with 4 understrength battalions. That meant roughly 32 men per kilometer of defensive line. The Soviets had committed 2 full rifle divisions to break through at Kollaa. The 56th Rifle Division and the 164th Rifle Division together numbered over 20,000 men. They had T-26 tanks and BT-series fast tanks. They had 152mm howitzers and 122mm guns. They had Polikarpov Wyr-16 fighters providing air cover. The Finns had rifles and a few machine guns. They had improvised petrol bombs the soldiers had named Molotov cocktails, after the foreign minister who claimed bombs were food parcels. They had courage, and they had nothing to lose. In the first 2 weeks of fighting, Finnish positions along the Kollaa River had been hit by an estimated 15,000 artillery rounds. The frozen earth erupted in geysers of black soil and white snow. The pine forests were shattered into jagged stumps. Soviet attacks came in waves, sometimes 3 or 4 times per day. Brown uniformed soldiers advancing across the white landscape like columns of ants. The Finns would beat back one assault with concentrated rifle fire and grenade barrages, then another would begin before they could collect their dead. The snow was stained pink in patches that spread wider each day. Finnish headquarters had asked the impossible question, could Kollaa hold? Lieutenant Arne Jutalainen, commanding 6th Company of Infantry Regiment 34, had given an answer that would become legend. Kollaa will hold unless the orders are to run away, but holding required killing, and killing at Kollaa required men like Simo Häyhä. The other soldiers in 6th Company had laughed when Häyhä arrived with his personal rifle. The Finnish army issued the M2830, a modified version of the Russian Mosin Nagant, with improved sights and a better barrel. It was an excellent weapon, standard issue for every Finnish infantry unit. Häyhä brought his own M28, the civilian version he had used for competitions. Same caliber, 7.62 by 53 millimeters. Same bolt action, same 5-round internal magazine, but older, simpler. A weapon designed for hunting, not war. When someone asked why he did not use the newer military model, Häyhä said he preferred the stock length on his personal rifle. The M2830 was slightly longer. His civilian rifle fit him better. When someone suggested he should use a telescopic sight like the Soviet snipers, Häyhä shook his head. He had thought about it carefully. A scope sits higher above the barrel. You have to raise your head to use it. Raising your head means presenting a larger target. A scope lens can reflect light and reveal your position. A scope can fog in extreme cold. Iron sights are lower, simpler, more reliable. The other men called his approach old-fashioned. They called it peasant shooting. One soldier said iron sights were fine for hunting rabbits, but this was war against a modern army with telescopes and artillery spotters and trained counter-sniper teams. Häyhä said nothing. He had been shooting since he was 17. He had won competition after competition in the Finnish Civil Guard, building a cabinet full of trophies in his small farmhouse. He knew what he could do with iron sights at ranges others thought impossible. But knowing and proving are different things. And on that frozen morning near Kollaa, Häyhä had not yet proven anything in combat. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905, in the parish of Rautjärvi, in the Karelia region of eastern Finland. He was the seventh of 8 children in a farming family that worked land their ancestors had cleared generations earlier. The soil was thin and rocky. The growing season was short. The winters lasted 6 months. The Häyhä children learned early that survival meant self-reliance. They learned to hunt for meat because store-bought food was expensive. They learned to read animal tracks in snow because that was how you found your dinner. They learned patience because the forest rewarded those who waited. At age 17, Simo joined the Finnish Civil Guard, a voluntary defense organization that trained civilians in military skills. Finland had only been independent since 1917. The new nation needed citizens who could fight. Häyhä discovered he had a gift. His hand was steady when others shook. His eye was sharp when others squinted. His patience was infinite when others grew restless. While other young men wanted to go home after hours of target practice, Häyhä found a kind of peace in the discipline of breathing, aiming, squeezing. He began competing in local matches, then regional matches, then national competitions, his home filled with shooting trophies. He completed his mandatory military service in 1925 with Bicycle Battalion 2, learning basic infantry tactics and fieldcraft. Then he returned to farming. In 1938, the Civil Guard offered advanced sniper training at Uti. Häyhä attended. He was 32 years old, unmarried, living alone on a small farm, hunting wolves and elk in the winters for extra income. He was not really a soldier. He was a farmer who happened to shoot better than anyone else in Finland. When the Soviets invaded on November 30, 1939, Häyhä reported to his unit within hours. He packed his personal rifle, his competition ammunition, and enough clothing for a long winter. He was assigned to 6th Company, Infantry Regiment 34, under Lieutenant Arne Juutalainen. Juutalainen was a hard man with a complicated past. He had been expelled from Finnish cadet school in 1927 for drinking and brawling. He had served 5 years in the French Foreign Legion, fighting Berber rebels in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. The men called him the Terror of Morocco. He drank too much. He cursed constantly. He trained his soldiers harder than any other company commander in the regiment. The company deployed to the Kollaa sector on December 7th. Häyhä spent his first days learning the terrain. The front line ran along a frozen river through dense forest. The Soviets held the eastern bank. The Finns held the western bank, and a series of small hills overlooking the approaches. The snow was waist-deep in places. The temperature rarely rose above -20. Häyhä had a different approach than standard defensive doctrine. He would go forward, alone, before dawn. He would find a position with good sight lines and wait. When Soviet soldiers appeared, he would kill them. Then he would move to a new position before they could find him. It was exactly the method he had used hunting wolves in the forests of Karelia for 20 years. The prey was just different now. If you want to see how a farmer with iron sights became the deadliest sniper in military history, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you have not already. Back to Häyhä. At 0712 on December 17, 1939, Häyhä saw movement in the tree line 400 meters to his front. Soviet soldiers were forming up for another assault on Finnish positions. They wore dark brown greatcoats over padded uniforms. Their breath rose in white clouds. They stamped their feet against the cold. Häyhä counted 12 men in the first group. More shapes moved behind them in the shadows of the pines. He had chosen this position carefully the night before. The morning sun would rise behind him, shining directly into the eyes of anyone looking in his direction. He had cleared the snow in front of his rifle muzzle to prevent any disturbance when he fired. He had measured the distances to landmarks using a method his father had taught him for estimating range to game animals. The tree line was 402 meters. He selected his first target, a soldier standing slightly apart from the others, gesturing with one arm, possibly an officer or sergeant giving instructions. Häyhä settled his cheek against the cold wood of the stock. He exhaled slowly, letting his lungs empty. He felt his heartbeat in his chest, slow and steady. Between beats, he squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, a sharp, flat sound that echoed across the frozen landscape. The soldier dropped, folding at the knees and pitching forward into the snow. Häyhä worked the bolt in a motion he had repeated 10,000 times. Brass casing ejected to his right, new round chambered with a solid click. He acquired his second target. Another soldier who had frozen at the sound of the shot, head turning left and right, trying to understand what had happened. Häyhä fired! The soldier spun and fell, working the bolt again. Third target. A man trying to take cover behind a thin birch tree. The trunk was perhaps 15 centimeters wide. Not nearly enough. Häyhä placed his shot just to the left of the trunk. The soldier collapsed. 3 kills in approximately 15 seconds. The Soviet formation scattered. Some ran forward toward Finnish lines. Some ran backward into the forest. Some dropped flat in the snow, pressing their faces into the white powder, trying to become invisible. Häyhä did not fire again. He had learned patience hunting wolves in the Karelian forests. A panicked animal makes mistakes. A patient hunter waits for the right moment. He waited 11 minutes by his count. The cold gnawed at his fingers, his toes, his ears. His rifle barrel had not yet warmed from firing. The snow in his mouth had melted, and he needed to add more. He remained motionless. A Soviet soldier raised his head from behind a snowdrift, trying to spot the Finnish position. Häyhä fired. The soldier's head snapped back, and he did not move again. By 0830, Häyhä had fired 9 rounds. 9 Soviet soldiers lay dead in the snow. He still had not been spotted. He began his withdrawal, crawling backward through the snow until he reached a slight depression in the ground. Then he rose to a crouch and moved to a secondary position, 200 meters to the north. The Soviets began shelling his original location 30 minutes later, black explosions churning the white landscape into a chaos of dirt and ice. They had found it by tracing his bullet trajectories backward. But Häyhä was already gone. The pattern repeated day after day. Häyhä would move into position in the darkness before dawn, sometimes crawling for an hour or more to reach a spot with good sight lines. He would wait for targets, barely breathing, ignoring the cold that tried to kill him. He would fire with devastating accuracy, 1 shot per kill, never wasting ammunition. Then he would relocate before Soviet counter-snipers or artillery could respond. He never used the same position twice. He never fired more than a few rounds from any single location. He never stayed in one place long enough to be found by the counter-sniper teams the Soviets deployed specifically to kill him. The Soviets began calling him Belaya Smrt, the White Death. At 0723 on December 23rd, a Soviet counter-sniper team moved into position opposite Häyhä's sector. 3 men with scoped rifles, specifically tasked with finding and killing the Phantom who had become a legend among their troops. They used the same tactics Soviet snipers had employed against the Germans. Find a concealed position, watch for movement, wait for the muzzle flash, kill the shooter. At 0811, Häyhä spotted them. 2 men in a snow pit behind a fallen log. The third was somewhere nearby but not visible. Häyhä knew the third man was the dangerous one, the observer. The one who would be watching while his partners drew fire. Häyhä did not shoot the visible men. He waited. At 0847, he saw movement in a tree approximately 30 meters behind the snow pit. The third Soviet sniper was climbing to a concealed platform, trying to get a better angle on the Finnish lines. Häyhä fired once. The man fell from the tree. The 2 in the snow pit raised their heads, trying to identify where the shot came from. Häyhä killed them both before they could find cover. 3 shots, 3 dead Soviet snipers. Elapsed time, 4 seconds. They deployed their best marksmen to hunt him. Häyhä killed them. They offered artillery support to any unit that could identify his position. By the time shells arrived, Häyhä was gone, crawling through the snow to a new location. They tried night attacks to catch him moving. Häyhä did not move at night. He was already in position before they started looking. On December 21st, 1939, 4 days after his first kills, Häyhä achieved his highest single-day total. 25 Soviet soldiers dead between dawn and dusk. 25 shots fired. 25 hits. His commanding officer asked how this was possible with iron sights at such distances. Häyhä said the conditions were good, clear weather, good visibility, many targets. He did not mention the hours of lying motionless in snow, the numbness in his hands and feet, the discipline required to wait for the perfect shot when every instinct screamed to fire faster. Lieutenant Utalainen requested that Häyhä be promoted and awarded. Finnish headquarters initially declined. Häyhä was just a corporal. His kill counts seemed exaggerated. No one could achieve such numbers with iron sights in Arctic conditions. Utalainen sent witnesses. He sent confirmation from multiple observers who had watched Häyhä work. He pointed out that Soviet radio intercepts showed increasing panic about an invisible Finnish sniper who could not be stopped. The Soviet frustration was documented in captured letters and interrogation reports. Unit commanders complained that men were refusing to advance during daylight hours. Soldiers wrote home describing a phantom who could kill from impossible distances without ever being seen. One captured officer said his men believed the White Death was not a single man, but a team of snipers operating across the entire Kollaa front. The truth was more disturbing. It was one farmer from Karelia with an obsolete rifle and no scope, lying in the snow, waiting. By mid-January 1940, Häyhä had accumulated over 200 confirmed kills with his rifle. He had also begun using a Suomi KP/31 submachine gun for close-range defensive actions when Soviet forces reached Finnish trenches. The Suomi was a Finnish-designed weapon that fired 900 rounds per minute from a 71-round drum magazine. It was devastating in trench fighting. His combined kill count was approaching 400. He had become the most lethal single soldier in the entire Winter War. The Soviets were losing men at an unsustainable rate along the Kollaa sector. Intelligence reports captured after the war showed that Soviet commanders estimated they were facing a battalion of expert Finnish snipers. They calculated that at least 40 trained marksmen must be operating in the area to inflict such casualties. They did not believe one man could be responsible. In late January, a Soviet political commissar was captured during a Finnish counterattack. During interrogation, he described the psychological damage the White Death was causing. Men were terrified to move during daylight. Officers had stopped wearing insignia because anyone who looked like a leader became an instant target. Soldiers had begun refusing orders to advance across open ground. The commissar said Soviet command had placed a bounty on the White Death. Any soldier who killed or captured him would receive immediate promotion and a cash reward. Entire artillery batteries had been assigned to support counter-sniper operations specifically targeting this one Finnish soldier. Then the Soviets changed tactics. Instead of attacking in company strength formations that gave Häyhä multiple targets, they began advancing in small dispersed groups of 3 or 4 men spread across wide fronts. Instead of daylight assaults, they attacked at dusk when visibility favored neither side. Instead of searching for Häyhä's specific position, they simply saturated entire areas with artillery fire before any infantry advance. Häyhä adapted. He began working even earlier, moving into position at 0300 hours to be settled before first light. He expanded his operational area, covering more of the Finnish line. He started preparing his secondary positions the night before so he could relocate faster after firing. But the war was grinding down both sides. Finnish ammunition was running critically low. Replacement troops were scarce. The defensive line at Kollaa had been pushed back 3 times, each time reforming on the next ridge, the next frozen stream, the next cluster of hills. On February 11, 1940, Häyhä recorded his 500th confirmed rifle kill. 500 Soviet soldiers dead in just over 2 months. An average of more than 5 kills per day, every day in the worst winter Finland had experienced in decades. His superiors finally approved his promotion and commendation. He was presented with a custom rifle manufactured by the Finnish weapons designer Aimo Lahti, personally built to Häyhä's specifications. But Häyhä continued using his original rifle. He said the new one did not feel right in his hands. The Soviets had not given up trying to kill him. They had simply accepted that conventional methods would not work. On March 6, 1940, Häyhä was in position near a cluster of rocks overlooking a Soviet assembly area. The morning was overcast, visibility reduced to perhaps 300 meters. He had fired 3 rounds and killed 3 soldiers when a Soviet counter-sniper spotted his muzzle flash. The bullet that hit him was an explosive round designed to fragment on impact and cause maximum tissue damage. It struck Häyhä in the lower left side of his face. The impact destroyed his left cheekbone. It shattered his jaw. It tore through muscle and soft tissue and exited through his right cheek. Häyhä collapsed in the snow, blood pouring from wounds that exposed bone and teeth. His spotter, a soldier named Kollaa, dragged him to cover under fire. Finnish medics reached them 20 minutes later. They found Häyhä unconscious, his face unrecognizable, but somehow still breathing. He was evacuated to a field hospital, then to a surgical center behind the lines. The doctors did not expect him to survive. His wounds were catastrophic. Infection was nearly certain. They operated anyway, working for hours to repair what they could. Simo Häyhä lay in a coma for 11 days. On March 13, 1940, he opened his eyes. On the same day, the Winter War ended. Finland and the Soviet Union signed the Moscow Peace Treaty. The guns fell silent at 1100 hours. Kollaa had held. The cost was devastating. Finland lost approximately 25,000 soldiers killed and 43,000 wounded. Finland lost 11% of its territory, including the entire Karelian Isthmus, the city of Viipuri, and Häyhä's home region. 422,000 Finnish civilians became refugees in their own country. But Finland remained independent. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania would be absorbed into the Soviet Union within months. Finland alone resisted. Finland alone survived. Soviet losses were catastrophic. Official figures list 126,000 killed or missing. Wounded exceeded 264,000. One Soviet general wrote that they had won just enough ground to bury their dead. Simo Häyhä's final confirmed count was 505 kills with his rifle. Additional kills with his submachine gun brought his total to over 700. Both figures remain the highest confirmed sniper counts in military history. When a journalist asked how he became such an effective sniper, Häyhä answered with one word: practice. After the war, Häyhä faced months of painful recovery. 26 surgeries attempted to rebuild his shattered face. He lost significant function in his jaw. The left side of his face remained permanently disfigured. He never regained his pre-war appearance. The Finnish government promoted him directly from corporal to second lieutenant. He received the Cross of Kollaa, numbered 4, after Marshal Mannerheim, President Kallio, and Division Commander Svensson. He received multiple other decorations for valor, but Häyhä could not return home. His farm was now Soviet territory. Like hundreds of thousands of other Karelian Finns, he was a refugee from lands his family had worked for generations. He resettled in Ruokolahti and took up farming again. He bred dogs. He hunted moose. The forests of central Finland were different from Karelia, but the rhythms of rural life were familiar. He rose early. He worked the land. He kept to himself. The war had taken more than half his face. It had taken his home. It had taken the graves of his parents and grandparents, now behind a closed Soviet border. But it had not taken his ability to live quietly, to find satisfaction in simple work, to appreciate the silence of the forest. He never spoke publicly about the war unless asked directly. Even then his answers were brief. He did not consider himself a hero. He had done a job that needed to be done. Others had done the same. Many had died doing it. He lived quietly for 6 decades after the war, a small man with a scarred face who avoided publicity and declined interviews. When foreign journalists found him, he politely refused to discuss his war record. When young soldiers asked for advice, he told them to practice shooting and stay low. In 1998, at age 92, he finally agreed to speak. His answers were brief, on killing over 500 men. I did what I was told to do as well as I could. There would be no Finland if everyone else had not done the same. Simo Häyhä died on April 1st, 2002. He was 96 years old. His rifle, the M28, he had carried through 100 days of combat, sits in a display case at the Finnish Military Museum in Helsinki. Most visitors walk past without stopping. It looks like any other vintage Finnish rifle, worn wood stock. Simple iron sights, no scope. But it is not just any rifle. It is the weapon that killed 505 Soviet soldiers in 100 days. It is proof that one man with training, patience, and courage can change the course of history. If this story moved you the way it moved us, please hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We are rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Finland? Our community stretches across the entire world. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Simo Häyhä does not disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make that happen.